All right, we are gonna jump into lesson 6 and we're gonna talk about time management. I hope to give you obstacles and solutions to time management as well as tips for success so that way you can walk away feeling like you understand how to manage your time a little bit better after we've just finished the first lesson. But before I jump into that, I wanna give you a quick fact, some numbers here. Every day we get 86,400 new seconds. We get 1,440 new minutes, and we get 24 new hours. And every day we spend all of them. That is a lot, right? So I want to talk about some obstacles and how we overcome them. Obstacles to how we manage our time wisely. So what we're gonna do, I hope you have your notes. I wanna give you kind of like a little bit of a preview. We're going to create a chart on your page. So you're gonna have 3 columns and we're gonna talk about 2 different kinds of problems. We're gonna talk about, so we're gonna create 2 charts, okay? And I'll show you how to label those in a minute. But the first column is gonna be list of problems. The second column is gonna be the evidences of those problems. And then the last one is gonna be the solution to those problems. So let's dive into the first chart. So you're gonna create that chart. And on the top of that chart, I want you to write motivational problems, okay? So we're gonna create this chart twice. In this first chart, we're gonna talk about motivational problems. These are obstacles that need to be overcome in the area of time management. So the first problem we're gonna list here, go ahead and list laziness. And then the second problem we're gonna list is procrastination. And then number 3 is overactivity. And let's begin to fill these in. So we're gonna go through the evidences and solutions of each of those. So when we look at laziness, a lot of times we'll just think, oh, teenagers are lazy. Now, I've got a teenager, and one of the things that I've learned is they are growing so much. They're developing physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They're exhausted. And everything that the world is throwing at our young people right now, they're tired. So when I look at them, I don't necessarily look at them and go like, they're lazy. I think it's difficult to be a teenager and they need rest. So I hope to kind of take off the stereotypes of what we're thinking about these problems or these obstacles, and I hope to kind of reframe them so that we can see them kind of in the life of an adult, and that we can help us understand how do we grow and how do we mature. It's one thing if little kids are like this, if teenagers have some of these things that they're working on to eliminate or to master time management. But as we look at adults, if adults are still living this way, this is where we would go, okay, remember the transformation is in the person, not in time, because time can't be changed, right? So evidences of the problem of laziness. There's some examples here are careless mistakes are made. They just don't care that they're making mistakes, or they make a mistake carelessly and they're like, it doesn't matter, you know? Or they'll think, oh, well, we'll get over it, or something like that. They don't really tend to their work or their life thoughtfully. They'll take naps often. Now, again, I'm not talking about somebody who is grieving, in a season of grieving. I'm not talking about somebody who is going through depression and you need counseling to heal and pastoral care. I'm not talking about these outside situations. I'm talking about somebody who just hasn't matured in their character and in their executive functions and how to manage their time. So another one is idle chatter or over socializing. So these are the people where they get to work, but they're not actually working. They're talking too much, right? Maybe they're a volunteer that is focusing too much on chatting with what's going on in the news or what's going on with football. Hey, football season's coming at the time of this recording. But we just get so chatty and we're unable to focus on what it is that we're really there for, what the purpose is. Another evidence is we'll take the easy way, right? Lazy people tend to take the path of least resistance. They don't want challenges. They want to look at a hill and climb it by looking at it instead of doing the hard work. Another example is daydreaming. Maybe you go to church, or maybe you're in a college class and you're in a course and you're just staring out the window, or you're scrolling through social media and you're just in another place, right? You're thinking about something else. Daydreaming can be an evidence of the root of laziness, where it's like, hey, I do not want to put my thought and my attention and my focus on what it is that's at hand. Another one is failure to listen carefully to instructions. This can easily be seen, like an easy example of this, it would be at work. Say you get a new job and you go through training and you don't care to take notes. And then you have to go to the job and you start working the job and you're not able to perform at the level of expectation that your boss had, or the rest of your peers or others who are also being hired. Sometimes it's because just in training, we didn't pay much attention. And one way we can adjust is by taking notes or asking questions or trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about how we participate in these environments that we're in. And another one is bypassing chain of command. Look, I've got kids, and so I know they want to go play outside and they love to try to skip their chores so they can just go play with their friends. But as adults, we'll do that too, right? We'll be like, I don't need to work, or I don't need to get these errands done. I just want to go hang out with my friends. I want to go see this movie. I want to go scroll, or I want to go talk about what's going on and float the river or whatever. And what will happen is we will just kind of bypass talking to our boss to get the day off and then call in sick. Or we'll bypass talking to parents if you're a teenager, or if you still live in the home with, maybe you have a mentor or just somebody who's discipling you. Sometimes we don't want to talk to the person who's in charge because we know they're going to give us more work. Because doing more work is the right thing, and we don't want to do that. So here are two solutions to laziness. The first one is be diligent in pursuits. Be diligent in pursuits. And the second one is acknowledge your accountability. See, when we're lazy, we need somebody to say, hey, how are you and where are you at with this? Why didn't you get as far as we thought you could? Why didn't you get as far as you wanted to? What were the things that were obstacles for you in reaching this goal? And having somebody help stay on you and kind of support you from behind and kind of push you forward. Somebody that you're asking, say, hey, yes, I want you in my life. I want you helping me move forward and break this laziness, these habits off my life. Another problem, so this is problem number 2. So we're gonna go in the chart left to right. Some evidences of procrastination. So you might be sitting here going, I'm not lazy, I'm good, but I do save all the projects or everything for last minute because I work better under pressure, or I work better under stress. But as you get older, you realize that's not good for your health, or that's not good for your relationships. How do we recognize if procrastination is an obstacle for us? Here are some examples. We'll put off large projects or a bunch of small projects. Maybe we gotta run errands. Maybe you gotta drop off some returns to the Amazon. You gotta drop it off to UPS or whatever. Giving lots of excuses. And sometimes they're not even our own excuses. Sometimes we saw something on the news and, man, just life is hard. And we let it weigh us down because we're carrying something that we were not meant to carry. Another one is justifying ourselves with good works. So we'll be like, oh, well, I wasn't there because I was busy taking care of so-and-so because they had this issue and they had this problem. It's so important that we have to remember and recognize we're not Jesus and we're not the Holy Spirit. And so we do need to have boundaries on our time and not let people's emergencies, let people's urgency become our emergency. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And then the last one is preoccupation with personal difficulties. Sometimes we can get stuck dwelling on the past challenges. Sometimes we can get stuck dwelling on current challenges or even future challenges and troubleshooting, and we get stuck and we're unable to move forward until we absolutely have to. Let me give you 2 solutions to procrastination. The first one is be honest with yourself. What is it that's making you stuck? And how come you can't break through? And another one is acknowledge your weakness. And this is so important because sometimes we just need someone to be in the room, right? Maybe instead of maybe you have a remote job, but you need to go work at a coffee shop. Maybe you need to go work at a multi-workspace where there's other people, so that you are getting up, you're getting dressed out of bed, and you're going to a location and you're able to be more productive. Now, another problem is, this is the last kind of motivational problem. So this is number 3, and we're gonna fill out the bottom row here. Number 3 is overactivity. Now, don't ask me how I know all this stuff so well, because especially this section. But some evidences to overactivity, I'll tell you this, it's saying yes to everything, right? We don't wanna hurt people's feelings. What's going on is really important. And we love everyone. Saying yes to everything is going to hurt us in the long run. Another example is underestimating the time needed to get something done. Sometimes we just kind of overestimate, and we're thinking like, oh, I can get all this done in this short amount of time. And then we're in the middle of it and we're like, oh, I can't get all this done. That never happens during the holidays. Another one is never delegating responsibility. And this is so important because if there are things that we can outsource, if there are things that you can afford to outsource, if there are things that maybe you can raise up or train an employee or your children or your teenager, because they need to learn it anyways if they're gonna become an adult, what is it can you train and raise someone? So then you're not just like getting something off your plate, but you're actually also stewarding some responsibility when it comes to the people in your life that you're responsible for and giving them time. And then the last one is constant mental and physical fatigue. Now, I know this one, especially as a mom. So one of the things that I love, I'm so happy that I get to talk to you about time management, because as a female leader who is a church planter, who I'm a wife, I'm a mom, and I homeschool, right? We kind of look at all those and we would go, whoa. So I work full time and I homeschool, and I love my husband. And so I have to look at what am I doing with my time, and how am I making sure that I'm taking care of my mental, physical, emotional health, and how does all play out? And it's so important to understand our capacity. Every single one of us is different, and not every single mom is meant to be a boss mom, and not every single woman is meant to be a career woman, and not every single woman is meant to stay at home and only be home. So it's so important that we know who we are. So here are some solutions. So be realistic about capabilities. What are your skills and what's your capacity? Be realistic about your capabilities. Where do you need to grow? What do you need to work on? What do you need to set aside? And if we're so focused on personal development, we might forget that we need to pour into other people as well. Maybe we're so focused on one thing or another that we can miss something that God has right in front of us because we are limited. And then the second solution is acknowledge your limitations. This is where it's so important to acknowledge that you're human. God gave you limitations for a reason. We are not limitless. And even with God, there are certain things, if He doesn't want us to do it, we don't want to do it. So as we're going through things, if life has handed us something that we weren't expecting, be graceful to yourself. It's going to be okay. You're going to get through it. You're going to have to adjust, of course. But in the middle of whatever it is that we're trying to manage, or as we're trying to recover from overactivity, give yourself grace. This practice takes time. Got it? Okay, so that's our first chart. So let's go into our second chart. So we're going to do this again. Create the 3 columns. And at the top, you're gonna write structural problems. Okay, so we have structural problems over this chart. So the first one's motivational problems. This one is structural problems. And I wanna give these to you. Remember, the first column is the list of problems. The second column is the evidences of those problems. And then the last column is solutions to those problems. And we're gonna dive in. The first problem is no priorities. Having no priorities. The second problem is having no goals. And the third problem is no organization. So let's talk about the evidences of no priorities. One of the ways we can discover that someone hasn't really defined their priorities is they struggle to make decisions, right? They are indecisive. And it's not like in a collaborative way where they're waiting to get information from other people, but it's really like they don't know how to land on a decision and make a decision. Another one is aimlessness, where they don't have something they're reaching for. They don't have something that they're getting ready to celebrate. There isn't something in front of them that they are motivated to get to. Another one is emotional choices. Again, where we don't have priorities guiding us and making our decisions, our emotions will take the place of our priorities and make the decisions for us. Another one is we're driven by circumstances. So this is where you are that person where you create a schedule, but whatever happens, so-and-so texts you, so-and-so comes into the shop, or something happens, and it's all thrown off because of everybody's different circumstances. Another one is we're easily distracted. Come on, we all know about that squirrel reference, right? And it's so important to stay focused, and it's easier to stay focused if we have priorities and we know what it is that we're doing in that space or with that relationship. And then the last evidence of no priorities is we waste time. You'll see people wasting time. They're scrolling on their phone, or they go to work, but then they go home and then they're not doing anything else. That looks like wasted time. And so these are just some evidences of having no priorities. So let me give you some solutions to that problem. Well, the first one is, there's only one. Here it is. Establish meaningful priorities in relation to God, your family, your vocation, your ministry, and social life. So I think it's lesson 3, we talk about priorities. If you need help kind of visualizing that and drawing that out, we unpack that there. And I'm the one teaching that lesson. So you can go back to lesson 3 and see that for a reference if you need help. So let's go to the next one. Another structural problem when it comes to time management is having no goals. Now, some of us are like, I have all the to-do lists, I have all the goals, and I am it's overactivity. But then there are others of us who we don't have goals, we don't set goals, and maybe in the new year, we'll say something like, I don't set resolutions because they don't work. So let's talk about evidences of having no goals. How do we know if that's us or not? There's 4 of them, 4 ways we can kind of discover, is that us, or is that, our employee or the teenager that we're raising, is having no motivation. When we get up and go to bed, when we get up and we go to work or we go to church, but there's not a drive. There's not something that gives us passion. We're just doing it because this is what everybody does. Maybe there's no sense of direction. Again, there's nothing in front of us that we're reaching for, that we're grabbing towards, that we're motivated to reach. There's nothing in the future we're hoping to accomplish or to celebrate. And then no sense of accomplishment, again. And the last one is wasted time. So again, this is so important to understand, because when we waste our time, we're able to see that we don't have those goals, right? If we have goals, we'll look around and we'll go, man, I need to get this done. I need to get this done. I need to get this done. We will be able to fill that time with reaching that goal. And again, if you're like me, I'm the person that I have to stop with the overactivity, because I will sit down in my home and I'll be like, that still needs to get done. That still needs to get done. That still needs to get done. So I just won't stop. I will be the overactive person. I have to find the balance there, and I have to pause, and I have to make sure that my goals aren't telling me how to spend my time. Does that make sense? So solution to that problem is establishing realistic goals. A few ways we can do that are just starting with establishing realistic goals for that day. Maybe it's, I'm gonna eat 3 meals a day when it comes to your health, or Maybe it has to do with, I'm gonna read this much, or I'm gonna get this much work done, and then I'm gonna pause work, and I'm gonna spend this much time with my family. Maybe it's setting reasonable goals for the week or for the year. I would recommend starting with just one day at a time, and then make your long-term goals relatable to your short-term goals. That way you actually are able to achieve something bigger by taking it one day at a time. And then let's go to the obstacle of no organization. So some evidences of this is there's lack of procedures or lack of routine. A lot of times things can be done when we're just consistent. When we're consistent at doing the hard work, that's when things can be accomplished. And so when we struggle to set in a process or a procedure to accomplish something, that's when we'll see, hey, we're not reaching any goals. Well, why aren't we reaching any goals? Well, it's probably because we're not organized. How are we not able to manage our time? Because we're not organized. Another evidence of that would be frustration and transition. Okay, change is hard for everybody. And then there's that like few percentage of people, these are your early adopters, where they're like, change, bring it on, I'm here for this, right? Not everybody is in that category of that percentage. So if that's not you, you'll probably find you're frustrated, like you finally get a routine down and you're finally feeling like you're making some headway and you're making progress, and then something changes. Maybe it's summer break, maybe fall is starting, or now you have the holidays and everything is up in the air, or maybe now you're in a relationship or your job is finally starting to take off and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how do I manage this? Because I want this to be my career. And so looking at our lives, if we're frustrated in transition, that could be a symptom of no organization. We don't know how to go to transition from one season or from one thing to another. And that's where we just need to take a day, probably get on the phone with a mentor or with somebody who has lived that life. Maybe for me, in my world, it would be a female leader who is also a mom. I love having mommy mentors for me who worked full time, and then bonus if they homeschooled as well. That helps me so much hearing from them how they transitioned through the different seasons and carried those different things. So find somebody or find a few people that you want to be like, that are in your community, that are in your church. Maybe they go to your kids' school. Maybe they're they're the wife of the coach of your kids' team, and check in with them. Ask them, how are you doing this? How are you managing your time? And see how they organize it. Maybe there's something in there that you could try in that conversation. Okay, two more, and these are gonna be familiar because on the chart in other places, but the first one is inefficiency. We're just not as productive as we know we could be. Sometimes that's just the proof that we're not as organized as we could be to accomplish things. And then the last one is, again, wasted time. We waste our time when we're not organized. Now, I wanna give a balanced perspective on this. When you're doing something for the first time, okay, maybe you have an entrepreneur spirit and you're getting ready to start a business and you've never done this before, things are going to take longer than you may expect. As you go, that's where we just adjust. We learn to adjust how much time something's gonna take, whether it's the research to do it, whether it's getting the equipment or the processes and procedures to produce something. So as we learn and as we go, just adjust so that we're not wasting as much time as we used to. Does that make sense? So again, time management overall is maturing in all these different areas in the priorities of our lives. And we're maturing through the seasons, stewarding our life through time management. Now, I wanna end kind of on a high note. I wanna give you some tips for scheduling your time. And then I wanna give you one last thought. Okay, here we go. So how many tips do I have for you? I've got 7 tips for managing your time successfully, and there's some bullet points under those. I just want to make sure you know that. So the first one is develop a weekly schedule with a usual flow of events. So this is really important. A lot of people on their calendar won't put church on Sundays. They kind of like automatically know it's there, but what happens is summer comes around and then we just plan all the trips on all the weekends, and then we come back to work Monday, we're fried, and then we leave again by Friday, and then we're just out, and we end up missing the thing that is the most important to our life, and that is our relationship with the Lord, and then our relationship with people in our life. So first, fill in your Sunday church services, fill in your Sabbath day. Now, if you're like myself and my husband, our Sabbath day will change based on the season. So during the school year, our day where we pause and we don't work and we spend time with each other and time with our kids, that day is usually Friday. In the summer, it will sometimes switch to a Wednesday or a Thursday, because people, when we want to meet with people, we want to gather with people, and we try to make ourselves available for the weekends when people tend to be a little bit more available. Does that make sense? So it's okay that your Sabbath day that you honor could fluctuate. We tend to do 6 p.m. one night to 6 p.m. the next day. That way, that next day in the evening, we can actually prepare for the next work day. So that's what we have found works for us. Fill in your church schedule. So small groups and church services, make sure you don't forget those. And then fill in your regular work schedule. Some people, they don't have a regular work schedule, right? Like maybe you work one Saturday a month. Maybe you are 3 days on, 4 days off. 4 days on, 3 days off with work or something like that. Maybe you're in the medical field and your schedule looks like that. There will be some kind of routine. If it's not weekly, maybe it's monthly or bi-weekly. Try to fit that in as much as you can. Fill in other firm commitments. So maybe that's your family night, maybe that's your girlfriend night, maybe that's your date night, or it's your night with your grandkids, but fill in those priorities that this does not budge at all, no matter what's going on. The world could be on fire, and I'm gonna make sure I'm still spending time with my spouse. Then, with the rest of your free time, prioritize the remaining time based on your goals. Okay, so this is how this relates to these obstacles in the charts, because we will have free time either in between work and sleep or church and work, and we'll find that there's free time. What do we do in that free time? Do we go to work and then come home and scroll? Do we go to work and then come home and clean? What is it that we do that soaks up our time, whether it is important or it's not, and how can we readjust how we spend our time? Calendar that in, put that on your schedule. And then the last one is memorize your schedule. This is like the bulk, unchangeable part of your schedule. Memorize your schedule to avoid overscheduling or double booking yourself. And this is where you guard your time. So for me, during the school year, because I homeschool, I will guard my mornings, and no one is allowed to overbook. My husband doesn't set up a coffee for me and him and someone else in the church. This time is guarded, and I let nothing else, because I'm home, but I am home and I have a focus and I have a priority. So just because I'm home doesn't mean that I'm available to go off and do whatever I want. And so memorizing those big bulk things and guarding that. So when someone comes and says, hey, we're gonna do this morning brunch, I'm gonna say, I'm so sorry, thank you for the invite, but I've got something at that time. Does that make sense? So developing a weekly schedule with usual flow of events is the first one. Make wise use of our time off and legal holidays. So a lot of times this is where you'll see your hard workers. They go, oh, wait a minute. We're only celebrating, we don't leave until noon. Well, I'm gonna go do something. I wanna do something. Maybe it's you're working on a remodel in your home. Maybe it's get some extra reading done for an online class you're taking, or What is it? Where's that free time that kind of lingers and then just disappears because we don't think about using that to our advantage. We don't think about redeeming the time. So make wise use of time off, so vacations and then holidays. And the next one, number 3, is use Sundays to reflect on the week ahead. So a lot of times people will use Sundays as like your meal prep day for the week ahead. And when I was younger, I used to use Sundays as like my last day to catch up on homework. By Friday I was fried, right? And so I would take off Friday night. Maybe I would get homework done on Saturday, but again, there's a little procrastination in here. But on Sundays, if I intentionally carved out that time, said, this is when I'm gonna get my homework done, I'm preparing for the week so that I know the week ahead, I'm not gonna have a ton of homework on Tuesday and Wednesday, due Thursday. If I get it done Sunday, I have a little bit more space to breathe Monday through Friday. Does that make sense? So taking Sunday to reflect on the message, taking Sunday to prepare meals, taking Sunday to prepare for the work ahead of time will be very helpful and give you some breathing room through the rest of the week. Another one, number 4, is know how to handle interruptions. Okay, this is really important, and I think I referenced this. Knowing how to take phone calls, unexpected visitors, maybe in the office or at home if you work remotely, unexpected assignments, maybe you're a student or your boss that comes in and brings us extra project. How do we handle those things? Maybe it's just simple texts and notifications. We get texts and notifications so often. How are we handling those? How are we managing those? And I want to help give you a phrase. Someone else's urgency is not our emergency. And this is where you've got to guard your time, understand your focus and your role for the allotted hours, whether it's work, whether you've got kids, because we want to be good stewards of our time. And we're not gonna allow some outside force, whether it's an individual or a situation, to throw off our time. Does that make sense? Okay, they are not responsible before the Lord about how we use our time. We are. And so we want to make sure, let me give you an example. Let's say we have a family night, or just in the evening, we got small group or something. Someone might text us saying their marriage is on fire and that there's something going on. Well, the first text we're going to send back is, are you safe? If you're not safe, you need to call 911. Second question, if you are safe, let's Zoom after we've put the kids to bed or after we've finished this current appointment that we're in. We're not gonna throw everything off. We're gonna stick to the plan, stick to the calendar, and then we'll meet with them as soon as we can, but also when we can, that's appropriate. So we're still giving our kids our time. We're still giving our teams the time that is necessary. Does that make sense? And honoring for them. Know how to restrict time-consuming activities. So this is TV, entertainment, scrolling, social media. There's a way to limit it where it will notify you that, hey, you've used this much time, and you can make the decision to turn that off and no longer scroll. Other ways, sometimes hobbies or projects, even books, reading a book, we can get lost in a book and then just be like, oh no, I'm late to making dinner. So set a timer. Know how to restrict time-consuming activities. Number 6 is know how to rate various tasks. So there's 3 ways to do this, and I want to have you write this down. So the first one is looking at these different tasks and asking yourself one of these 3 things. Is it useless, important, or urgent? Is it useless, or is it important? And is it important, or is it urgent? Okay, another way to look at it is, what is the good decision to make? What's the better decision, but what's the best decision? Good, better, best. And then another way to rate various tasks, and I would say responsibilities, are, is this my will? Is this something I want to do? Or is this their will? Is this something somebody else wants me to get done? Or is it God's will? Is this something God has placed in my life that He has planned for me to accomplish? And then the last one is be sure to plan for times of rest and recreation. This is so important to living a life in a balanced way when it comes to managing our time. Okay, I've got one final thought for you, and that's this. There was a professor. He was talking to his college students, and he had a gallon-sized jar. It was empty, and he said, "Hey, is this full?" And they were like, "No." And so he takes these fist-sized rocks and he puts them in the jar all the way up to the top, and he says, "Hey, is this jar full?" And they're like, "Yep." And he looked at him, and then he pulls out this pitcher and he starts to pour in gravel. So these smaller little sand bits and smaller little pebbles begin to fill in some of the empty spaces. And he looks at them and he goes, "Is this jar full?" And some of them are like catching on, and they're like, maybe they're full. And then he's like, "Okay, good, we're catching on." And he takes another pitcher of water and he pours in the water, and it fills up to the very top. And then he stops and he asks the class this question, "What's the point of this illustration?" And one of the students says, "You can always fit more things in," which is kind of true, but kind of not, before you burn out. The professor said this, "No, the truth is this illustration teaches us if you don't put in the big rocks first, you'll never get them in." So as we're managing our time, it's important to remember, what are your priorities? It's so important that our priorities are surrendered to God. It's so important that our relationship with the Lord is thriving, that we're connected to Him. The most important thing is our relationship with the Lord. That affects how we manage our time. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.